You wake up, open your eyes, and look around. Everything feels solid, real, and obvious. You exist in a world of 3 dimensions: height, width, and depth, moving forward through time in a predictable, linear path. You navigate this space effortlessly, never questioning the limits of your perception. But what if those limits are real? What if they aren't just mental but physical? A built-in restriction, a boundary placed upon your very experience of existence. Let's run an experiment in thought. Imagine a species that evolved underground, deep inside a cave, where no light ever reaches. These beings have no eyes. Their world consists of sounds, vibrations, and the textures they feel around them. To them, vision is a myth, an incomprehensible fantasy, a meaningless word. No matter how much you explain color to them or the vastness of the sky, they will never truly see it. It exists, but not for them. Now ask yourself, could we be trapped in our own version of that cave? Could there be aspects of reality that exist just beyond our senses, entirely real but fundamentally unknowable? Human perception is shockingly limited. We see less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. We can't detect radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, or gamma radiation without technology. We rely on a small frequency range of sound waves, missing the ultrasonic communications of bats or the infrasonic calls of whales. We experience time as a forward-moving arrow, unable to perceive past and future as coexisting states, though physics suggests they might be. We take these limitations for granted, but they are not inherent to nature. They are simply the result of the way our nervous system evolved. If we had developed echolocation like dolphins, sonar like bats, or compound eyes like insects, our world would be unrecognizable. It would feel just as normal, but it would be something else entirely. In 1954, the neuroscientist John C. Lilly conducted a radical experiment, placing himself in a sensory deprivation tank, a completely silent, dark, and weightless environment designed to remove all sensory input from the brain. What happened next was unexpected. Instead of experiencing nothing, his mind generated everything: hallucinations, abstract thoughts, alternate realities. His consciousness filled in the gaps where sensory data was missing, creating entirely new perceptions. His experiment suggested something profound. Consciousness does not passively receive reality. It actively constructs it. And if our brains construct reality, then what happens when the construction is incomplete? The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that humans never experience things as they are, only as they appear to us through our senses. He called this the phenomenal world, the reality as we perceive it, a mental model built from limited information. But outside this is the noumenal world, the objective reality which we can never fully grasp because we are forever trapped within our own sensory filters. Think about this. Every experience you have, every object you see is not the thing itself. It is a representation, an interpretation created by your brain. The color red does not exist in the world. It is simply the way your brain translates certain wavelengths of light. Sound is not real in the way we perceive it. It is just vibrating air, turned into neural signals. Your entire reality is a construct, one that could look completely different under a different sensory system. So what does this have to do with dimensions? In 1884, Edwin Abbott wrote Flatland, a novel about a two-dimensional world inhabited by geometric shapes. The protagonist, a square, is visited by a being from the third dimension, a sphere. But the square cannot comprehend the concept of up or down because he has never experienced them. When the sphere tries to explain the idea of three-dimensional space, it sounds like nonsense, and yet the third dimension is very real. It is just beyond the square's ability to see. Now, apply this to us. We experience reality as three-dimensional beings moving through time, but physics tells us that higher dimensions could exist beyond our perception. Just as the Flatlanders could never perceive the third dimension, we might be blind to the fourth, fifth, or 10th dimensions, dimensions that are just as real as the one we know, but hidden from us. In 1999, physicists Lisa Randall and Raman Sundram proposed the idea of warped extra dimensions, that our universe might be a three-dimensional membrane, or brain, floating within a higher dimensional space. If true, this could explain why gravity is so weak compared to the other fundamental forces. Unlike electromagnetism or nuclear forces, which are confined to our three-dimensional brain, gravity might leak into higher dimensions, meaning there could be entire realms beyond our grasp, influencing our universe in ways we cannot directly detect. And here's where things get unsettling. If these higher dimensions exist, we would never see them, never touch them, never interact with them, just as a two-dimensional being would never grasp the concept of a sphere. But that doesn't mean they don't influence us. We might be affected by forces, structures, or even intelligences existing in higher dimensions, just as a shadow is cast by an unseen object. What would it mean to be visited by a higher dimensional being? To us, it might appear as something materializing and disappearing without warning, morphing in shape or size in ways that defy physics, or existing in multiple places at once. These descriptions sound eerily similar to accounts of paranormal phenomena, UFO sightings, or even religious visions throughout history, entities appearing, vanishing, defying all logic. Could these be glimpses of something outside our limited perception? If a higher dimensional being reached into our world, we would only see the cross-section of its existence. Just like a 3D sphere passing through a 2D plane appears first as a dot, then a growing circle, then shrinking back into nothingness, a higher dimensional entity could enter and exit our reality in ways that seem impossible. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Are we prisoners in our own perception? If we are like the beings in a cave, blind to the light of other dimensions, is there a way to escape? Can we transcend the limits of our senses and experience reality as it truly is? Some physicists suggest that consciousness itself might be the key, that our ability to perceive more dimensions may not come from technology, but from the evolution of awareness. If we could expand our consciousness beyond its biological constraints, could we break free from our dimensional prison? Or are we forever trapped, like the Flatlanders, unable to comprehend the vastness of what lies just beyond our reach? And if we are trapped, who built the cage? If true, this would mean that the force we think of as gravity isn't just acting within our three-dimensional world, it could be extending beyond it, bleeding into a larger, more complex structure of reality. Imagine an ant walking along a thin sheet of paper. To the ant, the paper is its entire universe, seemingly solid and complete. But to us, looking from a higher dimension, we know that the sheet exists within a much larger space, one where forces can act on it from angles the ant can't even conceive of. Now, take that analogy and apply it to us. If our universe is just a brain floating in a higher dimensional space, then what else might exist just outside our perception? Are there other brains, parallel realities stacked alongside ours, just inches away but completely invisible? Could interactions between these unseen dimensions be affecting our world without us realizing it? One of the most interesting implications of this idea is the nature of gravity itself. Compared to the other fundamental forces, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force, gravity is incredibly weak. You can pick up a paperclip with a tiny magnet, overcoming the entire gravitational pull of the Earth with ease. But why? The Randall-Sundrum model suggests that gravity might not be weaker at all. It only seems that way because most of it is leaking into higher dimensions. If that's the case, then our experience of physics is incomplete, because we are only seeing the shadow of a much larger reality. This brings up an unsettling question. If gravity can extend beyond our reality, what else might be reaching through? Could we be experiencing subtle influences from higher dimensional realms without even knowing it? Some physicists have speculated that dark matter, an unseen force that makes up most of the universe's mass, could be the gravitational pull of other brains, other realities stacked alongside our own. If true, then what we perceive as empty space could be teeming with unseen structures, forces, and perhaps even forms of intelligence that exist just outside our ability to detect them. But what if, instead of just looking outward into these higher dimensions, we look inward? What if consciousness itself is tied to dimensional perception? The mind as a dimensional gateway. One of the most radical ideas in modern theoretical physics is that consciousness might not be a mere product of brain chemistry, but rather a process that is tethered to higher dimensional structures. Neuroscientists have already discovered that the human brain does not process reality in a simple, linear fashion. It constructs a model of reality, filled with assumptions, shortcuts, and predictions. In 2017, researchers at the Blue Brain Project used mathematical models called topological data analysis to study the way neurons connect and form structures. What they found was astonishing. The brain does not just operate in 3 dimensions. It appears to process information through multidimensional geometries, forming complex shapes that extend beyond our normal perception of space. These structures appear and collapse as thoughts form and dissolve, creating what looks like higher dimensional patterns within the mind. This raises a shocking possibility. Could consciousness be a bridge between dimensions? Think about dreams. Every night, you enter a completely immersive reality, one where time, space, and logic often behave in ways that defy the physical world. Yet, within the dream, it all feels perfectly normal. Only when you wake up do you realize how strange and inconsistent the experience was. But what if your waking life is just another layer of perception, another brain, and what lies beyond is something much greater? Some ancient traditions and modern neuroscientists have suggested that altered states of consciousness, whether through meditation, deep trance, or psychedelic substances, might be ways of temporarily expanding human perception, tuning into higher dimensions that our normal waking consciousness filters out. Could it be that these states don't generate hallucinations, but instead remove the blinders, allowing us to briefly glimpse something beyond our dimensional prison? And if that's true, what happens when we stop filtering reality altogether? The limits of time, can we ever escape the present? Just as space might have hidden dimensions, time itself may not be what we think. In everyday life, we experience time as a straight line, an arrow moving from past to future, but modern physics suggests this may be an illusion. Einstein's theory of relativity shows that time is relative. It can stretch and compress depending on speed and gravity. Near a black hole, time slows to a crawl, while for a photon moving at the speed of light, time simply does not exist. To a beam of light, the entire universe is experienced in an instant, beginning, middle, and end all at once. This suggests that time is not an independent force, but rather a dimension, one that we are simply moving through. But what if we didn't have to move through it in a straight line? In theoretical physics, there is a concept called the block universe theory, which states that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. If true, then our experience of now is just a slice of time we are currently perceiving, like a single frame in a film reel. But the entire movie already exists. Every moment of our lives, every possibility, every outcome. It's all there, unchanging, waiting to be observed. Now, imagine if we were not limited to perceiving just one frame at a time. What if our consciousness could expand beyond the limits of linear time and perceive past, present, and future as one unified structure? Some have speculated that certain extreme neurological conditions, such as temporal lobe epilepsy or near-death experiences, may momentarily allow individuals to glimpse this larger structure. People who have experienced these states often report feeling as if they saw their entire life flash before their eyes, or as if they momentarily stepped outside of time itself. If such experiences are even partially true, then it suggests something extraordinary. The structure of time is not what we think, and our ability to perceive it may be far more limited than we realize. The final question, are we prisoners? Everything we have explored so far leads to a disturbing conclusion. What if we are trapped? Trapped inside a 3-dimensional perception of a higher dimensional world. Trapped in a linear experience of time when reality is timeless. Trapped in a biological mind that filters out nearly everything except for what we need to survive, and if we are trapped, who or what put us here? Is it a limitation of our biology? An accident of evolution? Or could it be something else entirely? Some philosophers have suggested that consciousness itself might be designed, that the limitations placed on our perception are not random but intentional. If we truly live in a simulation, then perhaps these barriers exist to keep us from perceiving the true nature of our existence. But then the real question arises, can we escape? If an ant can never comprehend the human world, does that mean we are forever blind to the dimensions above us? Or is there a way to expand our perception, some path to awakening that allows us to see reality as it truly is? If there is, we may be closer to the answer than we think. And if we are indeed trapped inside a reality we cannot fully perceive, then perhaps the first step to escaping it is simply asking the right questions.